And we had an election, and 80% of the voters voted for a party that supported and honoured the referendum, and then we brought forward the legislation to leave the European Union. I do not understand why people think this lacks democratic legitimacy. It's very clear where it comes from.
The problem is that Parliament is incapable of agreeing what that exit should look like, isn't it? I mean, we have the amendment tonight that would force Britain to join a customs union if she fails to persuade Brussels to allow Britain that free trade area on goods, and so on. I mean, the whole thing is completely chaotic. Everybody wants something different, and there is no way that you can persuade, well, your own party, let alone Brussels, that what you are offering is going to work.
Well, of course, this is the rub, isn't it? That we can't please everybody. You're quite right, John. We have to have a compromise position that enables the country to get an agreement with the European Union, because the ball now lies in their court. And the way I would put it is this, that it's up now to the EU 27 to determine what sort of relationship they have with us. We put forward our proposal, and it's up to them to decide whether they want a people's Brexit, as I would call it. In other words, about the prosperity of the people of Europe.
Now, let me just be clear, is that a hard or a soft Brexit?
I don't accept these terms, because, and you know why? Because I never heard these terms during the referendum. These were terms that seem to have been invented since the referendum. What I want is a position where Britain can do what we said in the referendum, and that is to be able to take control of our own borders by ending free movement, to stop the wholesale shift of British money to the European Union, and to be able to make our own laws. Now, that's what we have to decide. And in tonight's vote, since you bring that particular vote up, just stand back and think tactically what this says to the European Union. If we say in a referendum, unless in an amendment to the House of Commons, if we don't get a deal by X date, then we will give you what you want. What does that say to the side you're negotiating with? And I go back to my point. It's now up to the EU 27 to determine what they want in terms of the type of Brexit we have for them. Because do they want this to be a bureaucrat's Brexit that locks Europe into the ideology of ever closer union, or do they want it to be something that's for the well-being of the people? And here in Britain, there's far too much negative, self-doubting pessimism in this process, rather than understanding the historic nature of where we are, which is we are reorientating Britain from a European orbit to a global orbit.
It may look like that to you. It doesn't look like that to the outside world, I would dare suggest. And the fact is that Mrs. May is in the position she's going to be in this afternoon precisely because she gave in to the Brexiteers, the ERG group, yesterday. The Sun is quoting a pro-EU rebel source this morning saying that more than 10 Tory MPs will vote for this, forgive me, soft Brexit push, which will be enough to defeat her majority if Labour backs it. She is simply not in control of events. That's the problem, isn't it?
The problem is we don't have a big majority in the House of Commons, and there is a very strong feeling on the issue, as you correctly say. But MPs have to decide what the message is that they're sending to EU 27 that we're having a negotiation with. And I think that we do need to raise the level of this debate. We need to raise the level of confidence, get people to understand that we're taking back powers to be a sovereign nation, and there's a reason for that. And that we think that there's a big world out there for Britain to take advantage of, and we need to get away from what we've had for the last 40 years and certainly the last 20 years, which is an obsession with the European Union as though it's the centre of the world, when in fact it's not.
And it looks a bit as if you're cutting and running in the face of all this, doesn't it? Because all this has to be decided. The nation's future hangs in the balance in lots of different sorts of ways, and you're going to take an earlier holiday for MPs. I mean, that is truly bizarre, isn't it?
Well, this is, of course, the last day that we have legislation relating to Brexit for the session. We've only got Thursday, Monday and Tuesday left.
That doesn't mean that you haven't got an awful lot still to do, does it? Well, and the idea that you're going to knock off a few days earlier and have an even longer summer holiday will strike many people as truly bizarre.
Well, and of course you have to draw the distinction, as you well understand, John, between Parliament and government, because government doesn't stop over the recess.
No, I understand that, but government can make their feelings felt, can't they?
And we'll have finished this Brexit legislation, as it were, for this point. And for some of us, of course, it's academic. I'm off to Washington and Tokyo next week to carry on some of the work I've just been talking about. So whether Parliament sits on Monday and Tuesday is up to MPs. It really doesn't matter to me.
And it may be that by the time you come back, and that's a long way away, obviously, but people will have decided, actually, you know what, perhaps in the end we are just going to have another referendum.
Well, and what happens then? What if we have a referendum and it goes the other way? Do we have best of three? Do we continue this process indefinitely? You know, when we have a general election and you don't win, you simply say, well, we'll have to do better next time. You don't call for another general election immediately. And so I think that the public gave us a clear instruction in the referendum: leave the European Union. It's time that we did leave, and it's time that we focused on the future and stopped fighting the referendum over and over again in Parliament and in the media. That argument is finished. We've been given our instruction. It's our democratic duty to implement it.
A word about the last referendum, or the referendums. There have been lots of them. You'll know that the Electoral Commission reported today that Vote Leave, I think you were on the campaign committee of it, did break the electoral law, so it's been fined and reported to the police for possible further action. What do you make of that?
Well, as you know, it was reported on the news, 2 individuals have been reported to the police. It would be inappropriate for me to make a comment, John, on what is now an ongoing police inquiry, as you know.
Liam Fox, thanks a lot.
It is 24 minutes past 8. Jacob Collier is a 23-year-old vocalist and instrumentalist who's been described as an absolute genius by Quincy Jones, no less. Last year, Jacob won 2 Grammy Awards for his debut album, In My Room, and on Thursday he's going to perform at the Proms alongside conductor Jules Buckley and his pop and jazz orchestra. Zoe Conway's been talking to him.
If you join the 3 million other people who've seen Don't You Worry About a Thing on YouTube, you'll see 6 Jacobs singing multiple vocal harmonies. And I counted him play 15 different instruments. What's striking about those videos is it's you popping up through the videos.
Just me popping up.
Repeatedly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a part of me that I watch those videos and I'm like, why doesn't this guy want to be in a band?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, I think so much of my learning process was a solitary one, really, and I took all these different ingredients of things I heard on records, I was playing with the jam sessions, I was sort of composing and arranging in my head, and I just decided to be all the members of the band. I wanted to have the control to examine the music I was creating from every possible perspective. I wanted to get my hands dirty for myself.
To the ocean, to the sky.
Quincy Jones, who's been mentoring him, says his talent is just frightening.
See that cosmic love.
Now we have to talk about Quincy Jones,
Oh, we do.
a man who has worked with Michael Jackson, Frank Sinatra, Billie Holiday, Jude Ellington, amongst others. Says to you, I'd like to produce your debut album. And what do you say?
Well, essentially, I said, well, I'd like to just be friends for now. And I mean, Quincy
just
is...
hang on, but that's quite extraordinary. Why did you say that?
I felt that I had a world of understanding music that I wanted to stay faithful to, you know, and that's the world that existed within that little room in North London where I still create music today. It's existing in there and knowing how to source a particular kind of a sound, you know. So, for example, if I want a snare drum to go, I know how to achieve that sound, you know. It's like a mixture of that little saucepan with that little pot with the knocking on the floor and a little knock clap and a lap, you know. And in order to communicate that to a producer, I think I'd lose so much time.
Deep are dreaming and are scheming.
Do you recognise this idea that you're trying to defy the laws of music, that you're rewriting music theory?
A lot of my most favourite words are made up. I think Roald Dahl is an excellent example of that, in a rather British way. And I think that with music, it's no different. I think if something feels right, it's probably right.
What can I give you?
There was one thing I did in an arrangement of a very beloved Christmas song called In the Bleak Midwinter, and the fourth and final verse is actually in G half sharp major. So it's not really a key that exists. It's not G and it's not G sharp. It's halfway between, and it's just because G has a sort of settledness about it, and G sharp has a sort of euphoria and a richness that, and I wanted to find somewhere in between. I didn't want it to be one of those two. I just went between them.
I would do my part.
And so it was kind of like my ears were treading this new untrodden snow, and it was really exciting.
Then one day your life is through.
At the proms on Thursday, Jacob will be performing alongside an orchestra.
Singing a jump, singing a jump.
Can you bend the rules when you're on stage with an orchestra? I mean, can the orchestra keep up?
Unfortunately, orchestras are most at home in a 440 hertz, and it's quite upsetting, having spent so much time in B half sharp with one particular song. To be back in B is positively nauseating, but I have to put up with it because the orchestra sounds so good at 440.
How upsetting, Jacob?
It's very upsetting. I've never not been allowed to play a song in the key it was composed in before, but I think this is a rather special case.
You're bearing it well.
No, thanks. Yeah, cheers.
And tell your friends you love them so. Singing a jump, singing a jump, singing a tell them the jungle.
That was Zoe Conway talking to Jacob Collier.
It is now 8:30, and it is time for the sport with Rob.
John, thanks. Well, scan the back pages this morning and you'll see plenty of speculation about the closed season football transfer market to follow the hard facts of Cristiano Ronaldo's move from Real Madrid to Juventus and Daley Blind's return to Ajax from Manchester United. Chelsea's Eden Hazard features prominently. Real Madrid his likely destination after saying that, quote, it might be time to try something different. But Manchester United, meanwhile, are said to be ready to spend heavily on Croatian World Cup wingers Ivan Perisic and Ante Rebic, and Chelsea are interested in Juventus striker Gonzalo Higuain. But now to cricket and the conclusion today of England's 3-match one-day international series against India. It's at Headingley. India heavy winners in the first match, England with a comeback in the second. Start today at 12:30 with commentary on 5 Sports Extra. Plenty of interest, especially in India's left-arm wrist spinner Kuldeep Yadav, who's taken 9 wickets in the series so far. Our correspondent Jonathan Agnew's on the line. Morning, Jonathan.
Good morning.
And England have been focusing, haven't they, in particular, on net sessions with Merlin the bowling machine set up to replicate.
He's been brought out of retirement and he's outside at least.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, it's a brilliant machine and it sort of recreates those different deliveries that Kuldeep Yadav produces that you don't see very often. And that is that wrist spinner into the right-hander, but then really a more difficult ball really to deal with in one-day cricket when you're looking to be attacking, to be aggressive, is the googly, which sort of spins away from the right-hander, and you've got no second line of defence if you get it wrong. It's all about reading this man from the wrist, from 20 yards away, and believe me, it's not easy.
But a machine can't do that, can it? I mean, it can't replicate the action.
Not quite, no, but it does at least create the different deliveries. So you're reading the ball on the way down, reading off the pitch, working out what you're going to do. And of course, the fascinating thing is, and unless it's cracked out overnight, I haven't seen the India test squad yet. They're still hanging on to that. Surely this young fella's going to be in it because with the weather as it is, the pitches as they are, I think it'd be fantastic. So I really hope he plays because I love watching different sorts of bowling like that.
Of course. So 1-1 in this one-day series, but England, you'd think, with the momentum after winning game 2, and it's winner takes all.
Yeah, and that's a really key element, you know, because we're looking forward to cricket's World Cup. We've just dealt with football. Well, it's our turn this time next year. and the big difference is with World Cup cricket to normal one-day cricket is that it is winner take all. In that you lose a match, you're out, and that very rarely happens. It doesn't happen nearly often enough for me in international cricket. You play a series of 5, they often drift to a bit of an end, so it wins 4-1 or something. But this is important because it's all that extra pressure of actually winning a match when you really have to win it, and that is often missing from World Cup preparation. So that's just one reason why I think today's match is going to be absolutely brilliant. And it's too close to call. You can ask who's going to win. I don't know. It'd be really good to see England continue that momentum, but they are up against a really good team and a proper gauge, really, a proper challenge to see where England are. They're number 1 in the world at the moment on paper. Well, let's see if they can win today and prove it actually out in the field.
Yes, I won't ask you who's going to win, but I'm going to ask you whether Jason Roy's going to play. 30% chance of playing.
Yeah, so I doubt it. Therefore, they've got James Vince in the squad, and you know he's a fine one-day player. I mean, he had to go Test cricket, but and that'd be a shame because the opening partnership is key, and Roy and Bairstow have formed such a good start to these innings in this series so far, and prior to that you want them to keep going. But I'm afraid injuries happen. He's got a sore hand.
Okay, Jonathan Agnew, thank you very much indeed. And so to the racing tips: Beverley 5:30, number 4, Different Journey; Thirsk 6:40, number 6, Sebring.
Thank you very much, Rob. A word now from Danny Shaw about Final 4, which is tonight.
Prisons in England and Wales are awash with drugs. The trade is controlled by criminal gangs who exploit the vulnerable, the desperate and the weak, leaving families in debt. Those involved are reluctant to talk, but we've spoken to a former prisoner who claims he ran drug supplies in 9 jails. We hear from a woman forced to fund her son's habit while behind bars, and a recovering addict tells us how he evaded prison security to bring in contraband. That's prison, drugs and debts. Who's paying the price? Tonight on File on 4 at 8.
And the weather, partly cloudy skies with some scattered showers that may be heavy, but many places will stay dry.
You're listening to Today on Radio 4. John Humphries and Justin Webb. The time's 27 minutes to 9. And Susan Grace here with the summary of the news.
Theresa May faces further challenges to her Brexit plan in the Commons today after narrowly avoiding a defeat last night. The International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, told us it wasn't possible to please everyone and there had to be compromise. The Electoral Commission has fined the main Brexit campaign group, Vote Leave, £61,000 for breaching legal spending limits during the EU referendum. 2 people have been referred to the police. Vote Leave have called the action political. Republicans and Democrats have criticised President Trump for comments he made during his summit with the Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Mr. Trump had said he saw no reason why Moscow would interfere in the American elections, contradicting his own intelligence agencies. United Utilities, who supply water to almost 7 million people in northwest England, will introduce a hosepipe ban early next month. The restrictions are being brought in after weeks of dry weather.
Thank you. It's 26 minutes to 9. The Labour Party is having a huge fight about anti-Semitism, not over how to combat it, but how to, define it. The party's National Executive Committee meets today to adopt a new code of conduct on anti-Semitism, a code of conduct that the chief rabbi says would place it on the wrong side of the fight against racism. Adoption of Labour's new alternative to the internationally accepted definition would, he said, send an unprecedented message of contempt to the Jewish community. And a group of 68 rabbis wrote to The Guardian yesterday calling the actions of the Labour leadership insulting and arrogant. Among them was Laura Jana Klausner, who's senior rabbi to Reform Judaism, and she's in the studio. And so is Rael Wolfson, who's a member of the NEC, the National Executive Committee, formerly our board member of Jewish Leadership Council. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Rabbi Jana Klausner, just tell us first of all what it is about the definition that is being adopted by the party that upsets you so much.
The definition that has been adopted by the parliamentary party is fine. What we're looking at is the NEC. And the problem with this definition, this code of conduct, is that it hasn't been a result of wide consultation. Very few people indeed were consulted, which means that if this goes forward, then the leadership is defining anti-Semitism instead of a broad group of Jews. We have never seen, ever, 68 rabbis from ultra-Orthodox to very liberal signing and agreeing on the same thing.
But what is it? What is the difference between what the party is about to adopt and what is generally accepted as anti-Semitism?
So it's generally internationally accepted by the government, Wales, the Parliamentary Labour Party yesterday. So it's not narrow, it's like the world is, number one, the issue of consultation. So when you do something, who was asked the question, who gets to define what anti-Semitism is? The issue of intent, you have to now raise the bar so high by showing intent, which is a completely different way of measurement than in a criminal court, for instance. The issue around Israel, so rather than being able to say, criticise the government of Israel, which, we do, and is absolutely right, instead, you can criticise the endeavour itself of Jews self-defining as Zionists, because you can say, well, this endeavour is a terrible racist endeavour.
Right, and that, just to make it clear, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which all those bodies you were referring to signs up to that does not, under their terms of anti-Semitism, it would be anti-Semitic.
That's right.
To say that Israel is itself a racist enterprise.
As an endeavour.
And it wouldn't be under what Labour is about to adopt, you think?
Which I hope it won't adopt today.
Rhea Wilson, what's your reaction to that?
I think that there is a conversation to be had about consultation, and it would be foolish of us to dismiss the passion of the feeling behind, and I would never dismiss a letter that's signed by 68 rabbis, many of whom I've worked with and respect greatly. So putting that to one side for a second, I think the intent question is really, really important, because I believe, having worked on this code of conduct, that is a fundamental misreading of what we have created. I would never have agreed to something that created such a high bar. I believe that interpretation comes from a bit where we specifically cite intent as a way to identify that not only can you meet these criteria that are here by demonstrating anti-Semitism through your language, but on top of that, if you act in a way that maybe is not classically defined as anti-Semitism, but clearly your intent is to be anti-Semitic, i.e., I'm the only person in the room who's Jewish, and I'm being treated in a way that is hostile. No one references the fact that I'm Jewish, but I'm being treated in a way that is different to every other person, then that falls within the scope of the code of conduct. And I think that is a really important, it should be in the code of conduct.
And on the criticism of Israel?
On the criticism of Israel, the code of conduct, again, specifically recognises the right for Jews to have a self-determination, and for that to be the state of Israel. The one bit of the IHRA example that it doesn't include specifically is around classifying Israel as a racist endeavour. Now, the reason it does that, and it expands in different ways, is because there was a fear that opens us up to what does that mean, basically. One of the issues that we had around specifically adopting just the IHRA and its examples in full was that they didn't provide the necessary clarity. Many of the bodies that we talk about...
Isn't that completely clear? If you say Israel is, the very thing is a racist endeavour, and you compare, for instance, the Israeli policies to those of the Nazis, the other things that are in the internationally defined definition, why is that complicated or difficult just to say, yeah, we accept it?
Sure. Well, one of the things that the Code of Conduct does specifically include is, and it comes in the Chakrabarty report as well, does include references to and comparisons to the Holocaust, to Nazism, all these different things. That is in the Code of Conduct. But around racism, it was, what does it mean to talk about Israel as a racist state? Who gets to define what that is? Is it about policy? Is it about the way, and all the different issues that come up with the Israeli state?
As it goes to free speech, actually, to free speech about Israel and what it is, and the critics of the internationally recognised definitions say, and they have said, that actually it dampens free speech, and that's a different thing from anti-Semitism.
When free speech goes into the space of making people more vulnerable, and when Jews are turning around internationally as the government of this country too and saying this is anti-Semitism, then you're not talking about free speech. What I wanted to say in reaction to Ria is I would ask her to now go back to the NEC today and say, we didn't realise it would be seen like this. The Jewish community, as broad as ever, it's completely unprecedented, as saying we need to revisit it. So let's revisit it.
Do you think it will be?
I think that the statement that we didn't realise it would have this effect and that there's obviously work to be done is absolutely, how could we say anything but that? This is a living and breathing document. There's a commitment to keep the working group on anti-Semitism going to review this document, the Code of Conduct, how it works, and if need be, engage more people, because that is just...
Jeremy Corbyn, for instance, just come out and say, actually, you know what, we should stick to the international.
Well, I would hate any one political party to be fixed by the leader in any way, to hand over.
But he could provide leadership in this case and say, this is what I want.
I feel that he has not provided the necessary leadership, but it should never be on one person.
Ria Wilson?
I believe that this Code of Conduct is a robust document that I think goes further and gives more clarity and is more appropriate for a political party than the IHRA just in its simplest form. It's often cited, it's adopted by many organisations, most of those organisations are not membership organisations that need to turn it into a code of conduct that can be applied to individual cases, and that's why I think this document is one I stand by, but one that we need to be flexible over to build trust with the community.
And Laura Jelland, thanks both very much.
It is now 17 minutes to 9. It's something of a ritual for parents with a small child. A chunk of the evening devoted to inspecting the exercise book with all the work neatly marked, often in different colour schemes, etc., etc., etc. The teachers have obviously had to put a lot of time and effort into it. When you think about how much marking they have to do, all those kids, and they're getting fed up with it. So fed up, many of them are apparently leaving teaching altogether. And that obviously is a worry. So some teachers have decided enough's enough, and they are risking the wrath of parents. And
working for the school, and they can see it's having the impact intended, I think is absolutely an appropriate thing.
But as every head teacher knows, the other verdict that matters is in the playground.
I think it's a great idea, to be honest, because the mark doesn't always necessarily tell you exactly what needs to...
Call free 08085 909 693. Text 85058. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. Plus, see our privacy notice. bbc.co.uk/5live. This is BBC 5 Live on digital, smart speaker, smartphone and tablet.
Michelle, how are the roads looking out there? Well, the M77 in Glasgow, northbound, between Junction 2 Barrhead Road and Junction 1 Dumbreck Road. The accident there has been moved now. It was moved about 8:15, but there's queues of a half an hour going back to Junction 5. The M18 southbound, between Junction 3 St Catherine's and Junction 2 the A1M. There's an accident there which is blocking one lane. It was already busy because of an accident a little earlier. Traffic is queuing actually both directions on the M18. In the West Midlands, in Alton, the A41 Warwick Road, both ways is still closed for accident investigation work. It's just near Alton Station and traffic is queuing in the area. And the M4 eastbound at Junction 19 at Bristol, a breakdown is blocking one lane and causing some very heavy traffic. Michelle Dignan, 5 Live Travel.
The best live sport.
Carnoustie on the east coast of Scotland.
Here we go. Just can't believe it. I'm just gobsmacked.
It's missed to the right and he bows his head.
The curse strikes again.
Pure madness. The Carnoustie has done this twice in a row.
The pursuit begins. The Open, live from Carnoustie.
One of the most demanding of our Open Championship venues.
The trophy is glinting in the Carnoustie sunshine.
Listen live with the BBC iPlayer radio app. The Open starts Thursday on 5 Live and across the BBC.
Morning, it's 8:50 here on 5 Live now. President Trump and President Putin have been in all the newspapers, on everywhere, on the sites online as well over the last 24 hours after that meeting in Helsinki. But now Mr. Trump is facing a backlash for supporting President Putin's denial of tampering with the US elections. Effectively, Putin said he'd had nothing to do with it, and Mr. Trump chose to believe him rather than his own intelligence agencies. This is what he said.
I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators. I think that's an incredible offer.
No, fair to say that not all American politicians felt it was an incredible offer, and he's been condemned by many senior Republicans for his comments yesterday. A bit more election news, referendum news more specifically. Vote Leave being fined by the Electoral Commission. We were just speaking to them and referred to the police for allegedly breaking election laws during the referendum. And the other story that's been around and about today is that of sharks. You may have heard us talking about it throughout the programme. And the prospect of exotic sharks, including the great hammerhead, migrating to British waters within decades, apparently because of climate change. Ken Collins is from the University of Southampton and is a former administrator of the UK Shark Tagging Programme. He was part of the report. He wrote this report. Hello.